What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Thrawn Thursday, week 2. I appreciate every single person for being here, and let's get into it. So the question for week 2 was going to be, when Thrawn comes back in the Ahsoka Season 2 trailer, why is he declaring war on the Rebel Alliance rather than the New Republic? And I want to break it kind of into a few thought processes again, but we have to remember the last time we saw Admiral Thrawn before Ahsoka, he is being taken away to dark space with Ezra, a cold embrace with the Purgle wrapping around him and jettisoning him into star space, basically. And so the last thing that's going on with him is that the Rebel Alliance is still fighting. Palpatine is still alive, Vader is still alive. Han, Leia, all these main characters are still trying to bring the Alliance up. So it still hasn't even been established yet. We're still waiting for the Death Star to be destroyed, Death Star 2, all that good stuff. So he's missed a lot. So, you have to think when he's coming back, yeah, surely he's got, the preface is he's got no idea of what happens while he's in Peridia because he's in Peridia. So, he can only make assumptions, and he's probably running math games, different war games, different, logistical ideas about what's going to happen. But in his mind, he's probably thinking, okay, the Empire is still going to be the Empire. And on that other hand, we have to have the idea of, when we don't see it in Ahsoka, or we get too much of it, but surely when Morgan Elsbeth comes back and rescues Thrawn from this Gap planet to take him back to the main galaxy, while he's, with her and the witch mothers, and, surely there's a debrief of, like, what's going on in the galaxy, like the current state of the galaxy, like, what's going on with the Empire, like, not really there anymore, like, what's happening with, the Rebel Alliance, when she surely would say, oh yeah, the New Republic has taken over. So I think the fact that he comes back with the Rebel Alliance is a huge aspect that he doesn't recognize the New Republic. To him, it's just another off-branch rebellion of group of people that, they're not the Empire. So to him, it's like, okay, well, if they're not the Empire, they're not who I ride with, so, like, they're just an offshoot of who I was just fighting. And with some of those, the ideals of the Rebel Alliance still taking hold in the New Republic, the same logos, the starships, things like that, it's going to be very, I don't want to say like reminiscent, but he's going to know it. And I think that's one of the other things is, he's going to come back and see the New Republic utilizing Imperial gear, Imperial ships. Like in one of the cutscenes for the Ahsoka Season 2 trailer, we see I think it's one of the Gladiator vessels from the Imperial side, and it's got the big old blue New Republic painted all over it. So, like, you're going to see, like, Thrawn interacting with, destroying, and what I think is going to be taking hold of a lot of majority of these vessels, and then kind of utilizing those to create his fleet, more or less. And that kind of leads me into the part 2 of that aspect, kind of trailing off of where he doesn't really recognize the New Republic. But to him, he's coming back as what will be the big dog on campus. Like, he's going to have the Imperial remnant waiting for him. He's going to have, please let Pelion be there. Pelion has to be here. He's been around. Surely we're going to see it, but Pelion's got to be back. So we're going to get Pelion. We're going to get the remnants of the Shadow Council that are still there. We've seen some of them picked off over time. Moff Gideon's gone. We saw one of them die in the opening scenes of the Mando and Grogu movie. We see Mr. Legend himself, Johnny Coin, who he gets captured by the New Republic, so who knows what's going on with him. So, but we're going to see that out. We still have Hux doing his thing with all of his resources. So we're going to see a large allocation of Imperial remnant ships, resources, troops, etc. And Thrawn's going to come back and expect that to be his. So I think that's going to be where, when he comes back, it's still that fight versus the Rebel Alliance, where it's like, it's him and his power versus this offshoot of, what I would say he, in his mind, is like hooligans, trying to be the soldiers. But now, with no safeguard of having no Palpatine, having no oversight, more or less, he is the dude to call the shots. Like, everything's going to be done efficiently. It's going to be effective. He's going to take strategy into mind when they're doing everything. And so I think one of the things that we're going to see is off the rip. I think, again, this is in one of the cutscenes for the Season 2 trailer. But off the rip, I think we're going to get that fight scene over the Corellia shipyards. and I think Thrawn's going to come in and he is going to wipe the New Republic, and he's going to take control of Corellia. He's going to take control of the shipyards, and then from there basically use that as a crux to build up his fleet, and from it's like, okay, how many ships maybe get captured, because we also see the witches that are being boarding, basically, that are being dropped by the TIE bombers. They're a super cool scene, but they're going to be boarding ships, killing troops. So like, how many of these ships are being disabled and then taken over for the Imperials? So, I think that's one of the big things where moving forward with this, he's doing what he was going to do against the rebels had he not have had Vader or Grand Moff Tarkin and all those guys breathing down his neck, stealing resources, all that good stuff. And so to wrap it all up, more or less, the overall answer of why does he reference them as the Rebel Alliance rather than the New Republic? And the short answers for me, it's what he knows. He doesn't really care for them. It's just beneath him, so like he's not going to recognize his enemy to an extent, because that's giving them that recognition would be, more or less saying that they are who they are. So he's not going to do that. But I think he's just doing it for the love of the game, like he's coming back and it's like, I'm picking up right where I left off, and where I left off was fighting the Rebel Alliance, so I'm fighting the Rebel Alliance, and like anyone who's not the Empire is the rebels, and you're gonna get mopped. So I think that's the big thing where he's coming back, and they're playing into the nostalgia, they're playing into like the fan fiction. So like it's gonna be our boy Lars playing the part and coming back and just being that dude. Which, real quick, shout out for this episode, had to do it for my boy. Big dog on campus. And per usual, I wanted to get into some of the questions. Well, question that got asked on the previous post for this leading up. So the big thing was, remember, if you guys ever have any questions, make sure to check out the Instagram post, throw them in there, or in the YouTube comments below, and let me know, and I will answer them next week going forward on the Thrawn Thursday, which will be week 3. But for week 2, the question was, at this point in time, does Thrawn know about Luke Skywalker? And Darth Christensen asked, does he know about Luke, or since he was stuck in Peridea for all this time, like what's going on with that thought process? And I think the big thing with that is he probably does and doesn't. And let me explain that, because you're absolutely correct, where he gets he gets stuck in Peridea for all that time, and all that next storyline that plays out is going to be Luke growing up, getting older, becoming part of the rebellion, and then taking that step forward. But again, he missed all that, so like he doesn't know what's going on. But again, there has to be some catch up when he gets with Morgan, when he comes back to the Imperial remnants. So surely there's going to be this conversation where like, yo, there's this Force user that's going around and like absolutely mucked us, or different conversations of whispers around the galaxy that have seen Luke, that have heard about what he's done, things like that. Almost like the same vibe that Moff Gideon had when he saw that one X-wing rolling up, and the dude was terrified of one red X-wing, and it's like, why is Moff Gideon terrified? And then Luke pops out, mucks all his troops, and rescues the day. So I think that's the big thing, where it's like he may not know exactly who he is, but he's probably going to get this lore. And I think Thrawn's he wants to know his enemy. So I think the big thing is he would do as much research as he can to then find out who this guy is. And it would be insane if we get that that connection where they say, oh, his name is Luke Skywalker, and Thrawn's sitting there like, no shit, like this is the kid Anakin Skywalker that I got to deal with now. Like, what poetic justice. He would just be sitting there like, so I think at this point, like, he probably doesn't know coming back from Peridea. Maybe Morgan Elsbeth tells him something, but surely he hears something once he's back in the main universe, and especially if it's going to lead up to him being the heir to the Empire, there's going to be the interaction. Most likely there has to be some sort of conversation, some, crossing of paths, something, because if, Thrawn's just running around taking over the galaxy, everyone's going to be saying, where's Luke? So I hope that answers that question. I know that was like a little bit yes and no, but gave my reasoning behind that. But again, I truly appreciate every single one of you guys. I hope to see you next week, and you guys have a great rest of your night. Appreciate you. And Thrawn, your boy, I'm out. Appreciate you.